Welcome back to Bitcoin Core Signing Device. This is lesson 3, which will actually be sort of an addendum to lesson 2 because I forgot some stuff and some information we are updating about best practices. So forgive me for the little bit of change of information, but it shouldn't really be that big of a deal. One of the things I want to mention is that Heavily Armed Clown put together what we're calling Yeti 2.0, which is more of a guide version of how to, or it's a guide of how to set up a 3 of 7 multi-sig using Bitcoin Core. You might be familiar with Yeti Wallet, which is a small scripting put on top of Bitcoin Core to help you set up that multi-sig. But this is a way to eliminate any additional code from outside of Bitcoin Core, and it's a walkthrough guide on how to set it up yourself. And so I want to make sure that we're preparing ourselves in order to be able to do that without getting to that point and then saying, oh, by the way, here's all this different hardware that you need to get. So in lesson 2, talking about purchasing hardware, one of the things I talked about was purchasing CDs and a rewritable or writable disk drive for writing the CDs. And CDs are what we used in Yeti Wallet and for storing your private keys. And CDs are good, but CDs don't really last forever, or not forever. Forever is unfair because nothing, you shouldn't expect anything to last forever. But it has, most manufacturers, I think, they say that a CD should be good for 5 to 10 years. Now, those of us that grew up with CDs for playing music and maybe some video games and stuff, I think we have a lot of confidence that we could pick up one of those CDs from our childhood, put it in a CD player, and it's going to play the music fine. And that's with us abusing them, doing things like leaving them out of their case, not putting them back in their case, touching the underside with our greasy fingers, leaving them in the car, getting exposed to high temperatures or really low temperatures, maybe even getting them a little bit wet. And so all those things can deteriorate a CD and shorten its life. But they tend to still last pretty well 30-some years later, some even longer than that. But that said, there are better options. And before we get to the better options, I want to explain a little bit of the mechanics about how CDs work so that you can understand why these other options are better. And so the way the CD stores the data is there's an organic dye that a laser kind of etches in, and that's where the data gets stored. And because it's a dye, if you think about a painting, if you have a really old painting, you're going to really want to protect it. You're going to want to you want to look at it, of course, but you want to put perhaps even a glass over it where the frame is to keep it from getting junk and dust and fingers on it. And you probably also want to keep it out of the sun. Definitely want to keep it from getting wet. All that kind of stuff. Because over time, when it's exposed to those elements, the pigments are going to break down. And in the case of the CD, this organic dye is going to break down. So what we recommend is this product called the M-Disc. The M-Disc was a piece of technology. It looks like a CD or a DVD. But instead of using organic dye to etch the information in, it uses more of a stone-like material. They refer to it as glassy carbon. And so what that does is it's actually an engraving. So if you think about a stone that you scratch something into it, you can leave it out in the sun. You could put it in water. You could do more stuff with it. It's going to last a lot longer and survive harsher environments. And so the M disk that was originally manufactured and developed by a company called Millenniata, they advertised that their discs could last up to 1,000 years, which is really impressive. Unfortunately, in the year 2016, they went out of business, apparently mostly because industry was largely going to cloud computing and storage, and so there wasn't as much of a demand for their products. However, a company called Verbatim, which is a very large data storage company. You've probably purchased their blank DVDs and CDs. They bought the technology, and now they advertise a projected lifetime of several hundred years based on this ISO and IEC testing. And so if you purchase these, they don't sell them directly, but there's this little button here where to buy, and you can choose from any of these. I prefer Amazon. And so if you go on Amazon, click that, and you see their products that they sell. And so you can get a 10-pack of a 25 gigabyte M disk for $27. So a little bit less than $3 per disk. One thing to notice is that they also sell higher storage ones, 100 gigabytes. That's only a 5-pack for $74. So you're paying a lot more for the storage amount. But since we're only going to be storing private keys on this, your wallet.dat file, it really doesn't take up that much space. So you're fine to get something that is a lower storage size because you're never going to use it. As an alternative, and the M disks are what's most recommended, there is another option for gold archival grade DVDs. And Verbatim also makes these. These are much smaller storage, 4.7 gigabytes, but again, that doesn't matter. And what they use is they put a gold film layer onto the DVD, and that helps protect it. And so they claim that it has a lifetime up to 100 years, which is still pretty good. 100 years or several hundred years to have an overabundance of caution, which is good because it's potentially life-changing generational wealth. We're recommending using the M disks just because of that longer life. I mean, the likelihood that someone's not going to touch your private keys for several hundred years is pretty low because you're eventually going to die. Hopefully it's decades from now. And your heirs are probably going to have to distribute the Bitcoin somehow, and so they're going to assemble all of the keys and spend it. So that's probably the longest it would go without being spent, but we want to make sure that it's there for them. So a CD might be able to do the job, but an M disk will definitely be able to do the job, especially if you store it well. The other thing, too, is that I didn't look too hard on Amazon for archival grade DVDs, but I was seeing a lot of 50 packs and this one's $120. So it's cheaper per disc than the M disc, but if you have to go and get a 50 pack, you're going to be spending a lot more money than you otherwise would. So for the improved lifetime of the disc, and for really not that expensive, $27 for that for 10 of them, and you're going to be covered for the 3 of 7 and have a few left over for maybe some single sig wallets. I think that's what you really should do. And so if you think about what you're probably used to, which is a paper backup, if you used the mnemonics before, paper's great. Paper and pencil is great. It can last for a really long time if it's kept under the right conditions. So you might feel a little bit weird that, paper's analog, this is kind of digital stuff, but paper would last would have a much harder time lasting if it's exposed to the elements like water, fire, a lot of heat, a lot of UV. It can very easily get damaged. So you're going to really need to protect your paper too. And so you would just be doing a very similar thing with an M disc with how you're going to protect it. So make sure you buy some jewel cases for them. What I like to do is buy some of those fire and flood document bags. They can withstand very high temperatures in case there's a fire, and also withstand flooding in case you have a flood or they get wet. And so you just throw it in that pouch and in its jewel case, and you should be pretty good for a very, very long time. But with that, the other thing I said was to buy a writable DVD drive or a CD drive. And unfortunately, to use an M disc or a DVD, that's not going to be sufficient. So Asus ZenDrive is something that can burn DVDs and M discs. So this one cost $40. If you just search for M disc drive, I know Verbatim makes one that you can get, and it's also about $40. So I think I said $15 to $25 for a drive. Looks like it's probably going to be more like $40. So really, really not that much more expensive, especially considering what we're doing this for. And then finally, I don't think I talked about USB drives. And so we're going to need these for a few reasons. One of them is to be able to flash Ubuntu onto it to make it a bootable disk that we can use to install Ubuntu on our computers. And Ubuntu kind of takes up a decent amount of space. So Heavily Armed Clown for his Yeti 2.0 recommends 64 gigabyte flash drives, USB sticks, and he recommends two of them. And he recommends the Kingston Data Traveler, so 64 gigabyte one costs $10 each. You can also, you're going to need a USB drive or two more for moving the partially signed Bitcoin transactions between your online and offline computers. That is going to require a tremendously smaller amount of space, since a partially signed Bitcoin transaction is really just text. So you can get a couple USB drives, flash drives that are much smaller disk size, and save a little bit of money there. And so that's all I have for lesson 3. In lesson 4, we will talk about installing Ubuntu and walk through that. So make sure you go to BitcoinCoreSigningDevice.com, where we'll post all the videos, and try to start building that website out a little bit more, have more resources and everything else for you there. If you're watching this video on YouTube, do the like and subscribe thing. That helps spread the word out and get this in front of more people. And if you want to help out, best thing you could do is just share this with anyone that you want to help secure their Bitcoin the right way. So, all right, everybody, thanks for your time, and we'll see you in the next lesson.